Spring ball is officially over, but Scott Frost isn't taking any risks at quarterback.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gian. Thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me, as he does every single week, is my good friend Andrew Guko from The Last Word on Sports. We're talking quarterback today, Andrew, on today's podcast. We're talking about Dylan Risk. He's in the portal. We're going to talk about who's left and whether there's a front runner in the room. But let's start with the news. Dylan Risk has decided that he's going to hit the portal. Now, after the first open practice last spring, Scott Frost had a quote talking about the quarterbacks. He said, all four guys that have taken reps right now are doing good things. What we really have to eliminate is the mistakes. For as many good plays as we're making, one catastrophic play hurts you worse than three really good plays help you. I need guys that are seeing the game faster and making good decisions. So, with Risk deciding to hit the portal, presumably, he maybe wasn't seeing the game as fast as Scott Frost would like and may have been making mistakes. I don't think this is unexpected news here. And you and I talked before we start recording. You didn't really think that Dylan Risk fits what Scott Frost is trying to do.
He's really not the right player type. He's more of a traditional pocket passer. Not really the dynamic player that really thinks really fast on his feet that Scott Frost is looking for. And this is one of those, cut your losses kind of thing. There's an opportunity right now to still, hit the portal with the spring window. There's a little bit of spring practice left, but the writing's on the wall. You've got, a couple more days till that final open practice in lieu of a spring game that fans can come to. And Dylan Risk, he came in to UCF kind of the bottom of the depth chart. Last year, things just fell apart and none of the guys ahead of him took care of business. And he got an opportunity. He did great against Arizona, but again, it was Arizona. It was not a good team and there was no film on him. And as the season wore on and more film came out about Risk's play, his play decreased. It dwindled until end of the season. He was pretty exposed. That doesn't mean he can't get better, but it looks like all signs that were pointing that he was not going to be the guy. And you started 4 games. I can understand ego could play a little bit here, but everyone says that he's handled himself very professionally. And at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for you. This is the time to do it, though. You announce that, your intention of going into the portal and, who knows, this is an opportunity for UCF as well. Look for another quarterback to maybe get on scholarship because there's only 3 potential. There's 4 guys on the team, 4 quarterbacks on the team, but only 3 that really have the potential of playing on on the field during this time.
Yeah, look, this is you're getting feedback. If you're players, you're getting feedback from the spring. And here's what I love about this. Scott Frost is not going to waste Dylan Risk's time here. If you're not going to play, give him the feedback so that he can move on. But also, you've got to narrow down your list of guys who actually have a chance to hit the field quickly if you're Scott Frost. So you don't want to go into summer workouts with 4 guys and 2 of them, don't have a chance of playing, right? So I'm with you. I think that he did some good things, but if we're being honest, this was a guy that was elevated from 4th string quarterback mid-season, which is almost unheard of in college football, and nobody got hurt. It was just poor play by 3 guys in front of him. So look, he wasn't recruited by Frost. And if you're Scott Frost and McKenzie, Milton, every spring we go through this in all the programs I cover. There are 4 guys on the roster, and the coach has to do this dance of pretending to give everybody reps, right? And then after a few practices, you narrow it down to like 3 guys, and then hopefully halfway through spring practice, you narrow it down to 2 guys who are your potential starters. Well, I think the race is down to 3 now, but Dylan Risk, I think he's a talented kid. I do think he's a talented kid, and I think that this is a good decision by Frost to move on as quickly as possible. From him if he's not going to play, and all signs point to like, look, this is not a good marriage here, and every coach has to deal with this, Andrew. When you come into a program, you inherit players that you didn't recruit, and you got to make tough decisions about who's going to cut it in your system and who's not.
Right. And so, I mean, this is not unprecedented at all. And, according to Stephen Leonard at 247 Sports, who's a really good, source when it comes to UCF news, he said that camp intel was that he was not going to be the guy, but he handled it well. He handled his business well. And I want to give you a quote from McKenzie Milton based on just what you were saying about the possibility of having to use the spring portal. And he's saying at the time, quote, "We have 5 guys, and if guys end up leaving, it kind of is what it is. Your hands are kind of forced to have a full room. So, one guy exits. Okay, well, this gives UCF another opportunity to look for improving the roster. It's also not unprecedented to find your new starter in the spring. So, there's always that possibility that a guy comes in and just lights it up. This is a new team, a new philosophy, a new offense. And so how people click, the chemistry between the linemen, the timing between the receiver and the quarterback, and the accuracy, and it varies from player to player. And sometimes you just have to find the right guy where it just snaps into place. And who's to say that UCF can't use the spring portal to find another guy that actually ends up being the best guy, or it's one of the remaining 3. You've got Taven Jackson, you've got Jacari Brown, and you've got Cam Fancher. 2 of those guys are new. Fancher from FAU, Jackson from Indiana. So you've got 2 new players on this team. Again, as you said before, it's a new coaching staff. You might as well just have a whole new locker room of players at that point.
Yeah. Well, speaking of those guys, I want to talk about what this room looks like and who's left on the roster here right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right, guys. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Andrew, Taven Jackson, Cam Fancher, and Jacari Brown are left in this room here now that Dylan Risk is gone. You're down to 3, presumably real candidates. Let's start with Jacari Brown here. I want to break down these quarterbacks one by one. Jacari Brown started some games for Gus Malzahn last year. And look, he could do it with his legs, but he struggled to do it with his arm. What do you see Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton doing with Jacari Brown? He's made the cut here after the first cut, I should say, after the spring.
I think he has the, as far as now, probably the least potential to start at this juncture. He's not an accurate passer, barely 50%, throwing, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions last year, just kind of prone to mistakes. And while he has great legs, this is ideally Scott Frost wants to run a very spread offense. You need a guy who's got a good arm to throw downfield and can make, good decisions. Yeah. Jacari Brown has not proven to be that guy, but I mean, definitely has value as a tough runner and can definitely break open a quarterback run. But while a guy like McKenzie Milton had both, by the time he became an upperclassman, he had both passing and running. Jacari Brown's a very incomplete player.
Yeah, look, I think incomplete is a great way to characterize Jacari Brown's game. He ran for over 100 yards multiple times last year, but when it came down to it, when the chips were on the line and you got to throw the ball and you're down in the ball game, Jacari Brown was not the guy that was going to get it done with his arm, which ultimately led to them going to Dylan Risk because they needed a guy who was a threat to throw the ball. And that was not Jacari Brown. So you got to work on that this offseason if you're Jacari. But, he's got ground to make up. I think he's got a lot of ground to make up here with this new coaching staff. I'll be interesting to see what kind of ground he can make up. Next on the list, Cam Fancher, the transfer from Florida Atlantic. He threw for 1,528 yards last season, 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions there on the season there for the Owls. What do you see here from him? Does he need to be a dual threat here? Because he didn't have gaudy rushing stats. He had 99 carries for 365 yards and 3 TDs on the ground last season. So he's not a statue back there, but certainly in today's college football game, it helps to be able to run some.
Well, I mean, he can definitely run it. I mean, just remember sacks count against your rushing yards, and he was sacked 25 times last year for an FAU squad that was not great. This is your grizzled veteran of the group. Started 3 years. 2 years at Marshall, 1 year at Florida Atlantic, and it was fairly consistent. Not great. Didn't get a lot of passing touchdowns. Through a decent amount of picks, but the truth is, I wouldn't wouldn't put too much stock into that just based on team style and what they did. But you look at stuff like 65% completions for Marshall in 2023 for 2,100 yards. So I mean that's a decent blend of running. Let's look at his long runs. 2022 41-yard long. 23, 63-yard long, 24, 76-yard run. He is probably the closest as far as on the stat sheet, your dual threat player. He can run it, but he's taken a lot of sacks. So that's something that Coach Frost has pointed out. Limit the mistakes. One bad mistake, a turnover can nullify a whole slew of good plays. But because he has that experience, he can step in and run this team if need be.
Yeah, Cam Fancher, as you pointing out, a little bit of a better runner. Could Cam be the sleeper in this group? Though you're calling him kind of the grizzled veteran, but could he be the guy that surprises fans to emerge as the starter come fall?
Well, I think he's the most complete player of this group. As far as what we've seen on the field, the numbers that he's put up, and I think he's the most complete player. That doesn't mean he's the best player, has the most upside, but he's definitely has the best combination of the ability to throw the ball and run the ball out of these three.
Cam Fancher, second on the list. Now on to the presumed front runner, I think, in a lot of people's mind, Taven Jackson. Talk to me about Taven Jackson here. Now that Dylan Risk is gone and you're narrowing it down here, I think Taven was the guy that everybody was looking at as the heir apparent here under McKenzie Milton. He transferred in from Indiana last year. Just not gaudy stats there, but to talk to me about Taven Jackson, the sophomore.
Well, I mean, you're stuck behind Curtis Rourke. You're not going to get many chances to play, but he was second string, and when he played, he took care of business last year. Throwing for just a short of 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, a long of 69 yards. The thing about Jackson is he's not a runner. He doesn't tuck the ball and run much. He doesn't take many sacks, but again, he doesn't have nearly as much playing time is, compared to Fancher. So Jackson's got the most upside, but when it comes to game time, making these decisions and based on the style of offense, I think Jackson is probably your presumptive starter, but Fancher is going to be a guy who you have to keep an eye on because, again, sometimes you need that experienced player that can handle those pressure situations. As it can be a pressure cooker deal in some of these games.
It can be a pressure cooker. Again, Taven Jackson, the transfer from Indiana there. Look, Scott Frost is going to have to produce something here, and I think he's going to be able to show off, his what's the word I'm looking for here? His QB guru-ness, so to speak, right? Like, he's got to be able to develop a QB, man. And you don't have the obvious guy. You don't have the big-time recruit. So you're going to have to show what you can do with quarterbacks in year one. Andrew, before we move on, if you had to make a prediction today, who starts?
I just want to point out McKenzie Milton was not a big-name starter. Between Scott Frost and with the help of QB coach at the time, Mario Verduzco, they were able to take a very flawed freshman and turn him into a world beater that just had the touch. If I had to start someone today, it's probably Taven Jackson. You want to have that upside, but I do want to just highlight real quick that UCF's in a position where they don't have to name a starter. With Jackson and Fancher being brand new to this team, the expectation is they're not going anywhere. And I don't think Jacari Brown's going anywhere either. Where's he going to go? He may end up being third string. Unless he really wants to go to some small, podunk FCS school or maybe like, a smaller school in CUSA. There's not really many outlets for Jacari Brown based on his horrid passing numbers last year. I mean, kind of exposed himself. So I don't think he's going anywhere. As far as where Dylan Risk goes, I think he would be, excellent in a G5 school where he can, rise to the top and have a good run, much like, Mikey Keene left for Fresno State. Now he's at Michigan. We'll see how that pans out for him. But if I have to put on someone, I would say Taven Jackson, probably the guy I have penciled in at this juncture.
Well, look, maybe he's your front runner, but should there be a front runner at all at this point? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. Should there be a front runner at this point if you're Scott Frost? I'm not sure that there should be. I think he's trying to work out a lot. And I do think, at least in this first year, there's some advantage to having the competition for QB1 go into the summer, headed into fall camp. Now, once you get into fall camp, got to narrow it down pretty quickly because you got to have a guy. You got to start, game one prep. You got to have a leader. You got to have a leader of your team. But I'm not so sure there should be a front runner at this point, Andrew.
I agree. I don't think there should be, unless it's really one-sided. The truth is you're still installing a whole new offense with a lot of new players. I think there's value in not having a number one at this point where you can still tinker with it. You've got a whole new room in the wide receiver, group, so to have the option and the flexibility to move players around and try different combinations to see what works is not necessarily a bad thing. If it would be different, if the wide receiver room was a lot like the 2024 version, pretty stable, a lot of carryover from prior year, that would be one thing. But because there's so many new pieces here, quarterback at that point is just another piece on top of that. I think he's still a lot of time to learn. And, what they could do is they could, challenge the players based on the things they need to work on. Like, hey, you need to work on, being more vocal and leadership. Hey, you need to work on your accuracy a little bit on your quick, your quick drop, or you need to be able to turn tail and run a little bit faster. I mean, it could be, any other enormous, list of things that they could work on. But, they're by hanging a carrot in front, especially with all these new players, you can, bring the best out of them. I just think that it must have been very apparent that Risk was behind these other players, or at least one of them, that made it very apparent that he probably was not going to be the guy.
Yeah. Like, look, man, you look for that information early in the spring. I'm a big fan of competition in the spring and going into summer workouts, because in those summer workouts, leaders are made, right? When you don't have those scheduled practices and the players have to do a lot of things on their own, you see a lot of player-led things happening in summer workouts. And that's when you want your quarterbacks to step up, organize those things, get the receivers out there to throw, Andrew, and bring the team together. And through that process, a lot of times leaders emerge, not just in the quarterback room, in other rooms as well, too, but especially at quarterback. So if you're Scott Frost, you're looking from afar to see, all right, now we're through the spring. Let's see who takes the bull by the horns here and really tries to become a leader, for my team. I listen.
And there's room for it. I just want to throw out, there's room for this, because last year you had Kobe Hudson, who was the vocal guy, and then you had the quiet guy with the big stick in RJ Harvey. This year, who do you have? Miles Montgomery is probably your best bet at this juncture. So someone else is going to have to rise up, and that's like where you're saying those summer practices, workouts, and all that other stuff is the opportunity for someone to rise to the top and kind of, make themselves stand out. If you don't have good leadership on the field, I mean, things are just going to, just sputter. So someone's going to have to kind of learn how, to do this. And that's where the value of a Cam Fancher comes into play. A lot of time on the field. So he may be able to rise up in that, but also maybe help teach a player who hasn't had as much opportunity like Taven Jackson to be able to do the same. Iron shapes iron. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're, while they may be competing against each other, they also may be working to help each other, because at the end of the day, these players are here to win. And if one guy puts the team in a better position to win than the other guy, you know what? A good teammate's going to support that and build on it.
Yeah.
It's no, look at, let's turn the way back time machine, New England 2001, where Drew Bledsoe has to prop up Tom Brady. He was a consummate teammate, helped him out, rooted for him. And when he was out, and then when he was, supplanted completely, it's no different. KJ Jefferson, for all his faults, could have shut it down and left the team completely, but he didn't. He stayed on the team. And from everything I've heard, was a good teammate with his quarterbacks after the fact. So there's that opportunity to just, be a good human being, be a good teammate, and help each other out, because at the end of the day, it comes down to the win.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing who rises to the top of the QB conversation this summer. Andrew Guko from The Last Word of Sports, I want to thank you for joining me. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at Statboy Drew. And you can catch my work on Last Word on College Football, a part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.